For decades, one prediction has followed the United States like a shadow: that America is about to collapse. Foreign analysts, rival governments, and global commentators have repeated this belief across generations, convinced that internal conflict would eventually tear the nation apart. They point to political polarization, social angst, and cultural division as undeniable proof. From the outside, it often looks convincing. Elections turn bitter. Protests fill the streets. Public debate becomes loud, emotional, and relentless. To many observers, this level of disagreement appears unsustainable. They assume that a country arguing with itself cannot lead the world, cannot project stability, and cannot endure long-term pressure. But this assumption is built on a fundamental misunderstanding of how the American system actually works. Conflict has never been an anomaly in the United States. It has always been a feature. From its founding, America was designed around tension between states and federal power, between freedom and order, between competing visions of the future. Debate was not something to be avoided. It was embedded into the system itself. What rivals interpret as dysfunction is often the visible, savon, internal correction process. While arguments dominate headlines, institutions quietly adjust. Markets recalibrati. Industries evolve. Technology advances without fanfare. This creates a dangerous illusion for those watching from the outside. They see noise and assume paralysis. They see disagreement and assume weakness. History tells a different story. Time and again, moments that looked like the beginning of collapse turned out to be periods of compression. Times when pressure forced adaptation rather than destruction. America does not always move smoothly, but when stressed, it tends to reorganize instead of break. Each era of crisis produces the same reaction abroad: confident predictions, strategic miscalculations, and premature celebrations. Andicimi, those priorities changed, recalibrated, and often stronger than before. The mistake is always the same. Observers judge America by its visible conflict, not by its capacity to absorb it. Throughout modern history, moments of American instability have repeatedly been misread as signs of irreversible decline. Each time internal tensions rise, the same narrative resurfaces abroad. This time is different. This time the system won't recover. These conclusions are often drawn by comparing the United States to centralized or authoritarian systems, where visible unity is mistaken for strength. In those systems, disagreement is suppressed, conflict is hidden, and order is enforced from the top down. From that perspective, America looks chaotic by comparison. Its arguments are public. Its divisions are broadcast. Its flaws are openly debated. To external observers, this transparency feels like vulnerability. They assume that what is exposed must be fragile. But the American model operates on a fundamentally different logic. Power does not flow from silence or enforced consensus. It flows from competition between ideas, institutions, industries, and regions. When tensions rise, the system does not freeze. It reallocates. Political pressure triggers legal challenges. Economic stress forces innovation. Social conflict reshapes priorities. What looks like instability is often the system actively testing itself, identifying weaknesses, and redistributing power away from failing structures. This process is uncomfortable, is loud, and it creates the illusion of collapse for those who mistake friction for failure. History shows that America's most transformative periods were preceded by moments of intense internal strain, periods when outsiders confidently predicted decline right before major shifts in economic dominance, technological leadership, or global influence. Rivals often expect collapse because they project their own systems' limits onto the American one. In their experience, prolonged internal conflict leads to paralysis. In America's case, it often leads to reinvention. This miscalculation repeats itself because it is comforting. It allows rivals to believe that time is on their side, that patience alone will bring about America's downfall. But time has consistently delivered the opposite outcome. Economic collapse has been one of the most common arguments used to predict the end of American power. Whenever markets crash, debt rises, or unemployment spikes, critics rush to declare that the foundation has finally cracked. From the Great Depression to modern financial crises, the logic has always sounded reasonable. A consumer-driven economy cannot survive repeated shocks. Confidence will vanish. The system will implode under its own weight. Yet this expectation consistently ignores how the American economy actually responds to stress. Rather than clinging to failing structures, it sheds them. Industries that no longer serve the moment shrink or disappear. Capital moves. Labor adapts. New sectors emerge where old ones collapse. During periods that outsiders labeled as terminal decline, the United States was quietly building the next phase of growth. Manufacturing evolved. Financial systems were redesigned. Technological infrastructure expanded beneath the surface. What appears from afar as reckless instability often functions internally as a rapid reallocation of resources. Pain is not avoided, it is absorbed, redistributed, and eventually converted into momentum. This process creates visible hardship, which fuels external predictions of failure. But those predictions rarely account for scale. The size of the American market allows recovery mechanisms that smaller or more rigid economies cannot replicate. Capital flows internally, Innovation attracts global investment. Talent concentrates where opportunity reappears. Time after time, economists abroad predicted long-term stagnation. Time after time, productivity rebounded. New industries formed, and growth returned under different conditions. The mistake was not in noticing the crisis. The mistake was assuming the crisis was the end rather than the transition. Social fragmentation has often been presented as the final proof that the United States is unraveling from within. Periods of cultural tension must protest public. Disagreement are frequently cited by foreign observers as evidence that American society has reached a breaking point. To outsiders, these moments appear chaotic and uncontrollable. Demonstrations fill major cities. Institutions are openly challenged. Long-standing social norms are questioned, criticized, and sometimes rejected entirely. From a distance, this level of confrontation looks like a society turning against itself. Rivals interpret it as loss of cohesion, believing that internal conflict will eventually erode national unity beyond repair. What this interpretation misses is that social conflict has repeatedly functioned as a mechanism of recalibration rather than destruction. Throughout American history, some of the most intense periods of social tension preceded major expansions of rights, institutional reform, and long-term stability. These conflicts forced unresolved issues into the open, where they could no longer be ignored or suppressed. Unlike rigid systems that rely on enforced silence, American society allows tension to surface publicly. This exposure is uncomfortable, but it creates pressure for adaptation. Laws evolve, policies change, cultural boundaries shift. While rivals see fragmentation, the system is actively negotiating a new equilibrium. The process is messy, slow, and often emotionally charged, but it prevents pressure from building unnoticed until it explodes. The visibility of conflict creates the illusion of collapse. In reality, it functions as a release valve. Foreign analysts often assume that unity must be maintained through uniformity. In the American model, unity emerges through constant renegotiation. Social conflict does not automatically weaken the nation. When absorbed and processed, it has historically strengthened institutions by forcing them to reflect changing realities. The error repeated by outside observers is assuming that disagreement equals disintegration. History suggests the opposite. Time and again, moments described as cultural breakdown marked the beginning of structural adaptation, not the end of the American experiment. Military overstretch has long been cited as another reason. America was supposedly destined to fail. Critics argued that maintaining global commitments across multiple regions would inevitably drain resources, weaken readiness, and expose fatal vulnerabilities. From the outside, the logic seemed sound. No nation, they claimed, could sustain such a vast network of bases, alliances, and responsibilities without collapsing under the weight of its own ambition. Rivals counted troops, ships, and aircraft, assuming that numerical comparisons alone could predict outcomes. They believed distance would dilute power, that extended supply lines would fracture, and that response times would slow beyond effectiveness. What these assessments consistently overlooked was the Synthrouholiav, logistics and organizational depth in American military doctrine. Power was not defined solely by visible force, but by the ability to move, supply, and coordinate that force at scale, or the crises. The United States invested heavily in systems that rarely make headlines. Transportation networks capable of rapid global deployment, integrated command structures linking air, sea, land, space, and digital domains. Supply chains designed not just for efficiency, but for redundancy under pressure. While rivals focused on frontline strength, American planners focused on sustainability. They understood that endurance, not spectacle, determines long-term dominance. This approach allowed the United States to operate simultaneously across theaters without exhausting its core capacity. What appeared as overextension was, in practice, controlled distribution of force supported by unmatched logistical reach. When critics predicted collapse, they underestimated preparation. When they expected paralysis, they encountered flexibility. Military pressure did not force retreat so much as recalibration. Commitments shifted. Strategies evolved. Technology reduced dependence on sheer numbers. Once again, the mistake was confusing visible strain with structural weakness. History shows that American military power has often been most effective when outsiders believed it was stretched too thin. Technological decline is another narrative that resurfaces whenever the United States appears distracted by internal debate. Rivals often assume that political division slows innovation, that disagreement paralyzes long-term planning, and that fractured priorities leave America technologically exposed. From the outside, it can look convincing. Public arguments dominate attention. Budgets are contested. Policies shift with administrations. But this view misunderstands where American technological power actually comes from. Innovation in the United States has never depended solely on centralized direction. It emerges from a decentralized ecosystem: universities, private companies, military research, venture capital, and independent laboratories, all pushing in parallel. While political institutions argue, research continues. While policy debates stall, prototypes are built. While headlines focus on conflict, breakthroughs happen quietly in places far removed from public discourse. This fragmentation, often criticized as inefficiency, is precisely what makes the system resilient. No single failure halts progress. No political shift shuts down innovation entirely. Competing approaches exist simultaneously, increasing the odds that at least one succeeds. Time and again, rivals celebrated apparent technological gaps, only to be caught off guard by sudden leaps forward. Advances that did not come from grand announcements, but from cumulative pressure across thousands of independent efforts. Digital infrastructure aerospace systems, artificial intelligence, and advanced manufacturing did not emerge from silence or uniformity. They emerged from competition, experimentation, and tolerance for failure. The assumption that disagreement slows innovation ignores how American systems absorb chaos and convert it into creative tension. What looks like distraction is often diversification. What looks like disorder is often parallel development. By the time rivals recognize the shift, the technological balance has already moved. Political polarization is often presented as the final and most dangerous threat to American stability. From abroad, the constant confrontation between parties, institutions, and ideologies appears to signal a government incapable of coherent action. Observers point to gridlock, hostile rhetoric, and declining trust as evidence that the system can no longer function effectively. They assume that decision-making has slowed to the point of irrelevance. This interpretation overlooks how American governance was intentionally designed to resist rapid, unilateral change. The system favors friction. It forces negotiation. It slows decisions precisely to prevent permanent shifts driven by temporary majorities. What critics describe as paralysis often serves as a stabilizing mechanism. Policies change incrementally. Institutions absorb pressure without collapsing. Power remains distributed rather than concentrated. While authoritarian systems can move quickly, they also break quickly when errors are made. The American system trades speed for durability. Polarization creates visible conflict, but it also ensures that no single faction can reshape the nation without resistance. This resistance frustrates observers who equate efficiency with strength. Over time, compromise emerges not because harmony is restored, but because extremes exhaust themselves. Legal challenges, elections, and institutional checks slowly redirect momentum. History shows that periods of intense political division did not end American governance. They forced it to adapt. The same cycle repeats, predictions of collapse, followed by recalibration. The noise fades. The structure remains. Cultural influence is another area where decline is frequently predicted. Critics argue that America's soft power is fading, that its values no longer inspire, and that global audiences are turning away. From this perspective, cultural disagreement at home is seen as a sign that the American narrative has lost coherence. If the country cannot agree on who it is, how can it influence others? This view ignores how American culture has historically operated. It has never been static. It evolves through friction, contradiction, and reinvention. While rivals promote carefully curated images of unity, American culture exports complexity. Music, film, technology, and media reflect internal debate rather than hide it. This openness has repeatedly expanded influence rather than diminished it. Global audiences are drawn not to perfection, but to authenticity and dynamism. Periods labeled as cultural decay often coincide with creative explosions. New genres emerge. New platforms reshape communication. New voices challenge established narratives. Far from weakening influence, this constant reinvention keeps American culture relevant across generations. Attempts to imitate this model elsewhere often fail because they suppress the very tension that fuels innovation. The prediction of cultural collapse misunderstands the source of American soft power. It does not come from uniform values, but from the freedom to contest them publicly. Influence persists not despite disagreement, but because of it. One of the most persistent miscalculations made by America's rivals is the belief that time is working against the United States, that demographic shifts, social change, and generational turnover will slowly erode national cohesion until decline becomes inevitable. This assumption rests on a linear view of history, the idea that power naturally fades as societies age. From that perspective, America is seen as a nation past its peak, weighed down by legacy systems and internal contradictions. What this view fails to account for is how the United States continuously renews itself through absorption rather than exclusion. Demographic change does not simply replace the old with the new. It adds layers. New populations integrate into existing institutions, reshaping them without destroying their foundations. Economic participation expands. Cultural expression diversifies. The labor force adapts to emerging industries rather than shrinking into obsolescence. While rivals fear demographic pressure, the American system has historically treated it as a source of momentum. Population growth fuels demand. Diversity expands problem-solving capacity. New perspectives accelerate adaptation in rapidly changing environments. Generational turnover introduces tension, but it also refreshes ambition. Each generation challenges inherited assumptions, forcing institutions to evolve or be replaced. From the outside, this process appears destabilizing. Inside the system, it functions as renewal. Predictions of decline based on time underestimate the country's capacity to reorganize itself around new realities. They assume exhaustion where history shows regeneration. Time does not simply pass over the United States. It is absorbed, reshaped, and often redirected into new forms of influence. Rivals waiting for collapse through gradual decay have repeatedly found themselves waiting longer than expected. While the balance quietly shifts again, the pattern is clear and it is repeated across centuries. Predictions of American collapse rarely fail because the critics lack intelligence or data. They fail because they misunderstand the nature of the system they are observing. The United States was never designed to appear stable in the traditional sense. It was designed to endure stress, to bend without breaking, to expose its fractures early rather than hide them until they become fatal. What rivals often see as chaos is, in reality, feedback. Economic pressure signals inefficiency. Social conflict reveals unresolved contradictions. Political friction prevents irreversible mistakes. Each of these forces slows collapse by forcing adaptation before damage becomes permanent. This does not mean America is immune to failure. It means failure tends to be partial, localized, and corrective rather than total. Systems are abandoned. Strategies are revised. Institutions are reshaped instead of erased. History shows that true collapse comes from rigidity, not disagreement. From silence, not argument. From systems that mistake order for strength and suppress the very signals that could save them. The American model invites stress into the open, where it can be confronted, debated, and eventually absorbed. This creates cycles of tension that look alarming from the outside, but function as internal resets. Rivals who wait for a single breaking point often miss the deeper reality. There is no single moment of collapse because pressure is continuously redistributed. By the time external observers realize that adaptation has already occurred, the narrative has shifted again. New industries dominate. New strategies emerge. New forms of influence replace old ones. The mistake is always the same: judging America by how it looks under stress, rather than by what it becomes afterward. The world keeps predicting the end data, and the system keeps proving that survival for the United States has never meant standing still. It has meant transforming before collapse ever becomes necessary.